We are talking Spirits in the Dark. This is a micro-budget movie by writer-director József Gallai, who also stars in the role as our main character, really. And the setup here is this guy has lost his wife and baby, I think in childbirth, and he's somewhat depressed, as you can probably imagine. And he used to actually enjoy paranormal ghost hunting with his wife before that happened. And he sees on the internet a video that someone has posted of an abandoned building nearby where there's a mysterious ghostly figure, but there's something in the video that makes him think that it could have a connection to his deceased wife. So he goes to this abandoned building and obviously explores around there. And what will happen, you have to watch the movie to find out. Okay, so let's talk about this movie. It's a very short film, which I think is definitely to its credit, because there's not a lot here. What works, first of all? The guy, obviously, who has made this, obviously is a fan of horror movies and certainly horror imagery. And why I say imagery is because there's lots and lots of establishing shots here. And they look great, and this the misty woods on the way up there. There's this old, it looks like a legitimate abandoned building that's getting filmed in. Again, it looks pretty harrowing. The way it's filmed, the colour tones here and there, looks all great. So he has an eye for the eerie in regards to a visual picture, and if this was like eerie photography, then fantastic. But it's not, it's a movie. What else can I say maybe that worked? The idea that, I suppose the premise is relatively sound. The idea here that a guy is so stricken with grief, he's clinging on to any type of hope of maybe a connection to his deceased wife that drives him into doing more bizarre things, so to speak. So that was interesting. And on a technical level, I think it's relatively. This is actually going to be a problem as well. But it is a technically sound film for such a low-budget movie. However, let me circle back to that. This actually is a little bit of a confusing film in regards to how it was made. It's about 80% found footage, but there's problems with this. Because the bulk of the film is found footage, i.e. when we get to this abandoned building, we're looking at it through the lens of this camera. However, there are sequences that are not found footage either side of that, so at the beginning and at the end. And you're thinking, well, this is a found footage film because we see proper camera angles, at the beginning and the end. So who's filming that? So unfortunately, it becomes a little bit of a hybrid, but doesn't work because of that. And the second problem with the found footage as well, the camera that this guy's using, it looks like it's too good for found footage. So what I mean by this is when you have these shots of this guy walking around this building, this abandoned building, and there's no motion. It's a very smooth transition. And I'll tell you what it looks like. If you've ever played first-person video games where you get that obviously that, and you're walking through corridors and there's just this smooth transition, you're looking around corners and things like that, it doesn't look like someone's clomping around. It looks like it's on a dolly, basically, and being moved around. And I think what it is, it's probably got a camera, which is like a big camera, which has got obviously the anti movement thing, the anti I don't know what they call it, what the technical term is, but it stops the the shaky cam ultimately. But that's what it needed, because it just seemed too smooth to be a a found footage movie. Because what's this guy floating? He's gliding through these corridors. Now films use that, but not when it's a found footage movie. So you'll have this shots of these tracking shots or whatever in regular films, and you understand you don't want to have the shaky cam and the movement in them. But when it's meant to be this guy just having a video camera going checking out an abandoned building, you'd expect to see some of that. So unfortunately, I feel I have some technical issues with this movie before we even get into the narrative. So, like I said, it's a micro-budget film. Nothing really happens, to be honest with you. Yes, there is a ghostly encounter. But we don't really know what it's all about, to be honest. It's there are some vague plot elements that are kind of thrown in, but we don't really know what's going on. There's a MacGuffin that is introduced, for the best way to describe it. And again, we don't really know what the relevance of that is or where it's come from. There seems to be an antagonist that just pops out of nowhere, who doesn't appear to be a ghostly person, a ghostly thing, but they just turn up. So the narrative, despite the movie not really having much plot, is all over the place. It's, you know, if you have such a very basic plot, it seems difficult to be able to make a mess of it, but it has. There's virtually no dialogue in this movie. The vast majority of running time here is the camera simply being woven around all these kind of corridors. And as I've said at the beginning of the review, it looks great if you are doing still photography. And these corridors and this abandoned building looks like a great location and looks really spooky. But when you've got nothing really going on or very little going on, it doesn't make for a particularly interesting movie. And yeah, there are a few things here that will happen, but again, with such little happening, I would expect what does happen to be a bit more impactful. For example, just one minor thing, our character comes across some body parts, some human body parts, and if you came across that, and this is really before any type of ghostly encounter, you're thinking, oh my god, I'm calling the police, there's human body parts here. No. Oh, they're real. They're not fake. That's what he says. It's just a non-realistic reaction, and it's very typical of what you see in films, I would say. And I've said this on many reviews. I would like to see horror films that have real reactions, or they're at least kind of recreations of what people are really like in these situations. I mean, if I was a filmmaker, that's what I would be doing. Is to have not a kind of a movie reaction to things, which is what you get, 99 times out of 100. And that's just one small example, again, and just he has a ghostly encounter, and he's gone there looking for that, but the first thing he does is run away. I don't know. This movie, to be honest with you, needed more development. It needed more writing. I think it needed more people involved. The guy who's obviously behind this, it's a passion project for him, and like I said, on some technical levels, there's some good stuff here, and I think maybe there's a future as a cinematographer, but for certainly a storyteller, it needed to have more people involved in it. To be honest with you, this movie, its negatives outweigh the positives by quite a margin. So I'm going to have to give it a 3 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.